everyone. Thank you for joining us at CSA Cloud Trust Summit 2025. We are here to talk to you about standardizing SaaS security, specifically introducing the SaaS Security Capability Framework, SSCF. I am Oris Sieklik, Senior Director of Information Security at MongoDB. I look after a number of different security teams. I am also joined by Jonathan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Boris. Thank you. So Jonathan Villa, or if we've spoken before, most folks refer or know me as JV. I'm the Practice Director for Cloud Security at GuidePoint Security, responsible for managing a team that's kind of focused on the cloud service providers, native solutions, and several integrations, as well as a SaaS services offering and team that we manage here as well.
Thank you. So let's kick this off. Let me start by talking really quickly about the shared responsibility model. I'm sure you have seen this slide many times in different formats in the past, but understanding the shared responsibility model is crucial before discussing this topic. So in this talk, we will focus on the actions that SaaS customers or SaaS administrators, if you will, can take to enhance security of their SaaS applications. Specifically, what security configurations can SaaS customers enable, disable, or change in order to increase the security of their SaaS instances. Let me give you a little bit of context on a problem space. I want to cover the SaaS security space in general, some of the gaps that we see, why we think this is an actual issue, and then finally moving on and how we want to address it with SSCF. So let me start by discussing the risk profiles of different SaaS companies. On the left side of the slide, I've put together some examples of large SaaS providers. So Salesforce has 150,000 customers. Slack has many difficult to obtain security certification. The point is that most companies would view these SaaS providers as lower risk due to the strong reputation and more mature security practices. So in general, we would trust these larger providers more with our data. However, on the right-hand side, we see smaller SaaS startups where we may not fully understand how much security spend they have. We may not fully understand how many employees they have focusing on security. They may not even have any security certifications. So these smaller or lesser known SaaS providers would typically be considered higher risk, and their security posture may not be matching the large players, and henceforth, if we were to buy them, we would probably spend more time assessing their trust. So now that we established there are differences between how much trust we have in each provider, you would think that there is a relationship between what security capabilities they offer for their users. What we are seeing in practice is that the size of SaaS providers doesn't always correspond to the security capabilities or features they give to their customers. Let me demonstrate this on a problem and show you the differences in hypothetical case where we have 2 or 3 SaaS applications. So one application may support single sign-on via SAML, but it does not support any logging and is not able to list any API connections. So we may be happy about the SAML support in this specific app, but the lack of logging may be concerning to us. And then the other application may not have any SAML SSO capabilities, but it is able to provide accurate logging. So now we have 2 applications that both have valuable security features that we want to use, but neither of them has everything that we would like to see. And there are many other large inconsistencies in these applications. So these differences can be quite large between SaaS providers. The impact of these differences is also quite large and is depending on who you are. So let's take a perspective of larger enterprise with 500 SaaS applications. So based on your organizational security standards, you would require certain things for new SaaS applications to have. For example, if you are buying a new app, you will require that they have single sign-on via SAML. So now every time you purchase a SaaS application, you or your GRC team or your security team must invest time vetting each vendor, looking at their security capabilities before they are purchased. This obviously increases the time that it takes to onboard new vendors and create additional workflows on security teams. As you can imagine, the problems are quite obvious here. It takes longer for us to purchase SaaS applications, which means it's slower for business to start using them, which means it takes longer for them to see return on investment. It takes more resources from security teams to evaluate and investigate these tools. And as we know, most security teams are under-resourced. So we could use these resources elsewhere. And we can spend a lot of time trying to get the right questions answered from the vendors and to really get understanding of their security capabilities. So hopefully this resonates with some of you, especially in the larger enterprises. So overall, because of these differences in security capabilities, the vendor onboarding and vendor vetting takes significantly more time and introduces the risk. But this does not only affect you as a medium-sized enterprise, this also affects small startups. Now, if I was a small startup and I was going to purchase large enterprise customers, I know that they're going to be asking me to show my security practices. I know that they're going to be asking me to prove that I have some security capabilities. But the issue I'm seeing as a small startup is that I have limited resources. So how do I know which investment will matter most to my customers? So because of this disparity and different requirements across the industry, it is very difficult for me as a small startup to invest my resources effectively. For example, will my clients require SSO? Will they require logging? Obviously, it would be great to have all of this, but as a small startup, I have to really focus my time. Now, putting aside what customers would want, and yes, that is very important, as a small startup, I probably don't have large security team, and I might even lack the expertise in this area. So what security features should I build in order to demonstrate my trust and provide real security? Well, at the moment, this is not clear. So wouldn't it be great if such standard existed so I can educate myself and know what my target customers would expect? Well, here's where the SSCF would come in. But the point we are trying to make here is that lack of standardization of requirements and these differences in security features has a significant impact to many parties, including small SaaS startups and medium-sized companies. All right, so now we are reaching the problems statement and why we have started a SaaS Security Capability Framework. But let me kind of summarize it all on this one slide. So as we have explained, we believe there is a need for industry standard that defines minimal technical security capabilities of SaaS applications. This is because, again, there are major inconsistencies, which is causing significant operational challenges and increasing cost. But since this is a double-edged sword, this also impedes small startups. As of now, we believe there is no standard that describes what security features or security capability SaaS applications should incorporate into the platform. Now, again, we understand there are many standards focusing on company level controls or perhaps the underlying infrastructure controls, but there is not that many standards focusing on application capabilities themselves. So going back to the shared responsibility model, SaaS vendors don't always provide the correct capabilities to their customers to properly control and enable security features, which is a nice segue to our proposed solution. So let me pass it to Jonathan, who will explain it in more detail.
All right, thanks, Boris. Yeah, definitely, really a good representation, right, of what the problem statement is. I think when we look at the experience that you and I, and Rumka, our other co-chair, right, have been involved with, I think you've highlighted these very well. But we can move on to the next slide. So the SaaS Security Capability Framework is a standard that we've been really kind of working on for the last, I don't know, maybe it's been about a year. It seems like more. But we are proposing a new standard, right? Which again is the SSCF. So the goal of the SSCF is to provide kind of clear, direction and guidance, right, of security capabilities, features within SaaS applications, right, specifically on the customer side. So one of the things that we talked a lot about was, is this configurable, right? So, I, as an organization, am I able to make these changes, to map back to organizational requirements that I have? And it's one of the areas where I think, the collective experience of this group really kind of was highlighted where, a lot of us, whether, we're like Boris, for example, who's on the risk side, or myself and Rumka, the other co-chair, are on the consultant side. As we work with a lot of our clients, or Boris, right, his organization, to onboard applications, there really wasn't an option to even require some of these things for SaaS, from these SaaS applications. So hopefully, what the standard does is it, kind of provides a guiding light for those applications to make these features available so that organizations can, kind of remain in compliance with their own standards, and also industry standards too. But again, kind of going back to what Boris was saying too, for the startup, right? As they're looking to, get more clients, right, and grow their presence, this gives them, kind of a minimal security set of controls, or again, capabilities and features that they should implement to help, the streamline the vendor onboarding process. Just in some of my own experiences in advising startups, and Boris, kind you talked about this a little bit. There's a lot of times, right, where, things would slow down because, we couldn't meet, right, in the startup that I was advising, or the startups, we couldn't meet those controls, right? And we'll give some examples of what those are a little bit later. But, optimistically, one of the things that we're hoping to hopefully see with the standard is that, the SaaS security tool space has grown very, very fast. There's a lot of, independent software vendors out there that are leveraging, what we live in today. Today is an API driven world. So they're leveraging that from a lot of applications and platforms, to bring additional visibility, to their customers. So we're hoping that this standard gives folks that the kind of baseline of what to implement, but also what to be looking for as well. So the people behind the standard, and I do want to give Boris some credit, right? I think the genesis of all this is Boris, probably because he lives this, every day, right? And again, so myself and Rumka Dahan, you were on the consultant side, and we've been helping customers solve these problems as consultants. Let's say, hypothetically, right? Boris represents like the types of customers that we work with, but when he created the charter and brought it to the Cloud Security Alliance, and it was shared with us, we jumped on immediately, because again, we know it's a common problem that a lot of our clients are facing. So together with Lefteris, who's the program manager at the CSA, we enlisted the help of a pretty impressive working group, in my opinion. So what I really enjoyed was working with industry leaders, right? So if you kind of see some of the representation that was on the team in that kind of the SaaS security co-author space. I mean, we had ISVs, we had leaders, from their other organizations. We had a really good core group working on this and bringing a lot of insight from the field, right, or from real world examples on what they're seeing with customers, what requirements their own organizations have, and also what, for example, for the ISVs, what requirements they're running into when they want to, when they're trying to get a client. And outside of that, we had over 100 industry contributors, which again is one of the great things I like about, or I appreciate about the CSA, is the collective effort that we're able to bring to a lot of the working groups that, that are put together. So really good group. And I think it brought a lot of really good perspective. And again, all real world representation of, the struggle that a lot of us face today with, with either onboarding SaaS or selling SaaS. So when we look at the controls, I think it is important to kind of identify or define like what it is not, right? So there already are, several certifications, right, and standards out there for SaaS vendors as an organization, right? So for example, obtaining SOC 2 Type 2 or PCI even, right? If they're, if that's one of the things that they're doing, or an ISO 27001 certification. So this is not the intent of what this standard is. This is more from the consumer side, right? So imagine a scenario where your organization has a certain number of hardcore or hard set requirements that they need to have, right? For example, log ingestion, right? Or change management or configuration management. Today, those things aren't necessarily available, right, from a lot of these SaaS applications. So hopefully, what we're doing here is encouraging the SaaS providers to make those capabilities or those features available for consumption or for the consumer. So one of the questions that drove a lot of our thought process was, as a consumer of SaaS, can I change this? Right? So can I as an admin within the application, can I change or can I get this data? Is it readily available to me? So again, we also took into consideration the varying degrees of maturity of these SaaS applications, which Boris talked about earlier, right? So, we weren't looking to set a bar that was too high, that would kind of eliminate some of the early stage startups from adopting the standard. So what we did was develop a minimum set of technical capabilities that should be available to consumers. Our hope is that as this standard evolves, maybe we'll have a tier 2, kind of like an advanced tier. But with the first release, what we're hoping for is that adoption would be, pretty wide, because again, they are a minimum set of technical capabilities. And again, wanting to we want to avoid putting, undue stress on some of the startups. So again, which I've seen a lot. So I think this was a good, thing in the right move. So when you look at the breakdown of the capabilities, you'll see that a large portion of it is identity and access management based. Again, when you go back to what Boris introduced with the shared responsibility model, right on the SaaS side, of course, there's some things that you can't really, they just don't fall within the consumer side or the cloud consumer side, right, of that responsibility model. So identity is a big part of this, but there's some other areas that we think are important as well, and you'll kind of see the breakdown there. So an example of some of these. So for example, if we look at the first example here, right? So the capability or the control here would be that the platform supports programmatic querying of all current security configuration. So again, today, going back to the collective effort and the collective perspective that was on this, right? We've had, folks from all around the world representing various areas, right, of what we do for work today. One thing that came up was just configuration management, right? Or what is the current state of the SaaS's configuration for security, right? So that's one thing that we think should be introduced into applications. And again, everything's kind of done API today, right? So it really should be more exposing that information so that it's queryable, right, by either an ISV or by a custom solution that was developed by the organization. And then we went through and we identified some of the things that we think should be a part of that configuration set that could be queryable, authentication, right, RBAC assignments, entitlements, permissions, access control lists, things like that. And then we did provide some additional implementation guidance, kind of keeping in spirit with the CSA and what it does with some of, like, for example, with the CCM, right? So just, not necessarily dictating what needs to be done, but an example of, what would suffice or what would, meet the requirement. Single sign-on. Again, Boris, I think that's a really good example. We work with a lot of SaaS applications, right? It's interesting. Some don't to this day, right? Some still may not support, SSO, or they don't support SAML or whatever. So, but again, varying levels of maturity with SaaS applications. But coming from kind of having some SaaS startup experience. We all thought that this was definitely something that should be kind of a low bar thing that could be accomplished. So TBD on implementation guidelines because we are tweaking some things still today. So we want to make sure everything is in a good spot. So there'll definitely be an update to that. But the other example, right, that we kind of pulled out here for today is the log retrieval, I guess, method. There are some applications that we've worked with in the past that you have to submit a ticket, right, to get logs. Sometimes that could be a 48-hour period or a 24-hour period. But in today's world, I mean, streaming information is very common. So we definitely think that it's important for organizations to be able to query or retrieve that information via some sort of programmatic means. If you could stream it, that's great. But again, we're really just looking for it to be kind of, retrieved programmatically and in some sort of machine readable format. Of course, JSON is somewhat of a standard that everybody follows, but at least it's as long as it's consumable, I think is what's important here. So to summarize these are just an example of some of the things that we talked about and we would like to see in, kind of just adopted across the industry. We do know that on the consumer side, of the SaaS consumer side, these are things that are wanted, right? These are things that will help these organizations meet internal compliance, right? And meet, kind of those core requirements that the organization has. So if, the SaaS vendors kind of work towards this and make these capabilities available, I think everybody's kind of, going in the same direction. The timeline of the standard, right? Kind of going back to kick off again, want to just highlight, Boris is kind of being the genesis for this. So, started, August of last year. And then, we went through and did some early stage planning between Boris, Rumka, Dahan, and myself. And then, went through and enlisted the help of several people. Of course, the open peer review was interesting because now we have yet another set of eyes, right? Some more perspective on people that are, in various roles, right, throughout the industry. So more third-party, vendor risk people, more startups, more consultants. I mean, it was just a really good group a group of people providing some information. So, we do have a goal in mind here, right around the corner, to make sure that we're good to go to release this, and we are hoping for adoption of this, throughout various industries. So, conclusion. So, again, based on the collective, experience of everybody, we really do believe that this standard is going to address the capabilities that consumers or SaaS customers are asking for, or need, and maybe not asking for, but definitely need, right? And again, that perspective comes from working with a lot of organizations that are asking or having trouble meeting certain requirements. In today's world, the new method of delivering business applications is SaaS, right? No one is shipping CDs anymore or providing downloadable ISOs. At least I don't think they are, so, but we do believe that with this new way of delivering business applications, that this is going to streamline the purchase, right, the onboarding of these applications, and hopefully even, help the SaaS vendors as well. I know in some cases, there's, like when you look at the workflow for SaaS, the SaaS sales lifecycle, right? They're going through contract negotiations and everything. The customer usually requests a SOC 2, certification, and that they'll have that. But then sometimes what slows the process down is now third-party risk, gets a little bit more involved, and they start asking for, well, can we do this? Can we do that? The SaaS vendor never really thought that was going to be needed or never, planned for it. Boris touched on that a little bit. So in this case, with this type of standard, hopefully now there's some more and additional awareness. Um, Optimistically, I do spend a lot of time with ISVs as well. So I'm hoping that, a lot of these capabilities, of course, being available, via API will increase the capabilities of a lot of the ISV platforms that are out there today. Again, I've seen organizations that actually have written a lot of custom built solutions in-house. So hopefully this will help them as well. So that way they can, kind of their scanning process will scale across SaaS applications. Today, right, as you're watching this, maybe you're an organization with, 8 SaaS applications. Maybe you're an organization with thousands, because they're out there, right? We've talked to some folks that are leveraging nothing but SaaS, and yeah, this is definitely a challenge for them. So this thing that we're solving. So and again, to summarize it all up, again, the standard is a collective effort, right, of a lot of really interesting perspectives and people with a lot of experience. So, we think we really enjoyed the time spent building this standard and learning, and hopefully we made some friends, Boris, on this team because we had a lot of, a lot of back and forth, right, on some topics. But in the end, I think everybody was happy with the outcome. So thank you for attending. Hopefully Boris and I were able to represent the standard well. If you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to us. We'd be happy to chat. Boris, thanks for covering half of this.
Of course. Thank you very much.